We heard a lot yesterday about how we are disconnected from the story of our waste. We're disconnected from manufacturing in our society, and we are disconnected largely from the story of our stuff, where it comes from, where it goes. And as the waste industry, we're actually a victim of our own success, because when waste services are done well, they become invisible. I was recently on a hiking trip with my family, my young girls, down on the coast. We did 3 days walking in, walking out, and this disconnect became glaringly evident to me when my children had to carry all the food, all the water that they needed for 3 days. They had to go and dig a hole in the bush as required, and the whinging was incredible on the 3rd day when they realised they had to start carrying out all of the rubbish that they had created, including the 3-day-old tuna tins that were covered in ants. That disconnection really became evident. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. We pop it in the bin, we wheel it to the curb, and it's magically dealt with. So how do we go about reconnecting? Not just connecting with our audience, but reconnecting them to their story of their own waste and recycling. How do we pull back the veil of mystery that surrounds our curbside bins? And we heard yesterday how people thinking that robots are the ones sorting our materials. How do we uncover that and tap into the curiosity? How do we bridge the big gaps that we know our audience and our community have in understanding the processing, understanding the materials? And how do we drive those behaviour changes and promote those positive attitudes that we need to have achieved as educators in this space? Garth and I and the team down in Canberra have gone about using the most powerful tool that we as educators have in our toolkit. The powerful tool is experiential learning. It has the ability to make deep connections. I'd like you all to think back to your first childhood memory of your first school excursion. And I've asked a few people around this lately what their first excursion was. And of course we get the schoolhouse museums, the visits to the zoo, the bus wash is a favourite in Canberra, Questacon, Parliament House. We all remember them, even if they were decades and decades ago. An early visit to Questacon for me back in the 80s ensured that I had a lifelong passion for all things science after seeing the lightning cage and the earthquake house. You probably remember those too if you've ever been. These experiences are so powerful that they stay with us all our lives. Now, the research backs this up. It tells us that excursions have the power to connect us to concepts and ideas, to grow the understandings. They're recalled for decades and decades afterwards in a fond way. They help us drive the behaviour change, and they help us keep these really positive attitudes towards a topic and the feelings that we're trying to achieve. And because they're deeply connected, experiential learning opportunities such as an excursion, a field trip, an incursion, even theatre that we heard about yesterday, they are fun and they are powerful. So the journey for us, I'll take you back to the beginning. I'll tell you a bit about Canberra. We have a population of around 400,000, and while we are great recyclers and consider ourselves nation leaders, we have seen increasing challenges around waste generation, around stagnation in recovery rates and enthusiasm, much as other councils have, with a highly mobile population and increasing densification. Our waste resource management strategy sets out really ambitious targets of 90% recovery. In 2016, ACT NoWaste undertook a public campaign to get Recycled about recycling, to reinvigorate people and take them back to the 80s when it was fresh and new. You may have seen it or heard of it last year. In 2016, we also had Re.group step into the picture. So I'll just hand over to Garth here, if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. And so we took over, early 2016, we took over the operation of the recycling facility. And one of the first things that we realised was that it needed some serious work. So we undertook a very large and probably very ambitious project. So we stripped and completely rebuilt that facility. It was an $8 million investment that was it was done on a series of weekends because we couldn't turn it off during the week. So it was a very big project, and at the end of that, having upgraded it to a point where all of the equipment in there was best practice, and we were really proud of this regional best practice facility, you looked through the education window and you could only still see the in-feed area and the site of a new trommel. So we really wanted to look at how could we get the education experience up to that best practice standard as well, in keeping with the overall vision for the MRF and the upgrade that had been done. You got the button there? Sorry. Oh,
that's right.
You can talk too.
I can talk too. I can talk, that's for sure. In 2017, we also saw, of course, the ABC's War on Waste and the heightened interest that our community across Australia had in waste and recycling in particular. We've got the bump in the road there of China's national sword policy coming into bite, and continued interest from our adult community around recycling and what actually happens. They really want this veil to be taken back. So the time was right for us to really do something in this space, something innovative and new to engage our community, and so the Recycling Discovery Hub was born.
And the upside of the China ban, unscripted comment, but the upside is that no one's asked me about coffee cups for a while, which is fantastic, because that was the year before. So we decided that we wanted to get to that overall outcome. We wanted an overall best practice facility. We know what we're really good at. We're really good at building and operating recycling facilities, but we 100% recognise that we're not the people who day to day spend the time on the education with the community. That's very much Robbie's team, the NoWaste team do a fantastic job, and the nature of the contract is that we keep the room clean, but they do all the bookings, they do all the education services. So it was pretty obvious from the outset that it wasn't something, we didn't want to just put a lick of paint on it and hand it back to Robbie and say, here, look, now the windows are cleaner. We really wanted to work together and I guess capture the strengths from each team. We have a lot of technical strengths, but our day-to-day business isn't interacting with the community and talking to the school kids. So it was a really important that we did work together on this. There are a couple of things that we could bring, and certainly a whole lot of things that Robbie's team brought to really bring it alive.
Yeah, some of the challenges around working in this sort of partnership are the fine boundaries, I suppose, being defined around who pays for what, who maintains what, who's going to contribute, and the outcomes that we're seeking, and also ensuring that the outcomes are able to be used and benefit Re.group in possibly their other MRFs around Australia.
Yeah, it is an interesting boundary. As a MRF operator, particularly in the current moment, no one's got spare cash laying around, but at the same time, when you think about what's important to the viability of our business going forward, the community education and having good quality material coming to us is critical. So, that there is always that balancing act, but luckily we had Robbie to help us through that. So this is the old education room. Look, there's some things that are pretty cool. Like I like the window in this education room. I travel around to quite a few different facilities. This one's got a really good viewing area over the infeed, and it's a really good educational opportunity for people to see what it looks like when it comes in. That said, in terms of all the really cool equipment that we're telling them all about and all the great stuff we've just invested in, as you can see, that's pretty much the view from the room. You can see the side of a trommel, and it's a very pretty trommel, but it's it's not that exciting to see the side of a trommel. And that was, I guess, where we started to think about how can we look at this a bit differently. The number one concern from us as an operator is we agree. We want people to have a great experience or have an experience that they remember. We don't want that to be that their friend lost an arm because they were out in the MRF and it was unsafe. So it's something that we've been wrestling with a lot of our facilities and have been thinking about for quite a long time. Is how do we get to a point where people, it's worth them coming on site? They get more than just what they can see on a video online. But how do we do that safely? How can we make sure that these people have an immersive experience and something that is unique and exciting and memorable without walking them out to the plant? One of the things that we thought about during this upgrade was extending a walking platform out so that people could actually physically get out and see the plant. And to be honest, 10 years ago, that's probably what we would have done. The challenges that we saw with that, though, were do we go for a fully enclosed walkway so that there's no risk of any harm to anyone and no risk of anyone throwing things out, and then it just becomes a bigger than Ben Hur for something that's not that exciting. So we wanted to be smarter, as well. We started thinking about other options.
Yeah, I was pressured initially because as an educator I didn't like to rely on technology. And when Re.group suggested we look at an alternative such as using virtual reality in this space I needed a little bit of convincing, but I could see the power it could bring. I went away and I researched. We have other site constraints here. The room existing was 40 square metres. We could only have one class at a time. Buses can take 2 class loads. When you're forking out $300 for a visit for the day and you're competing against Questacon and the War Memorial, you have to offer something that is actually a rich experience. And so we really set the bar high for ourselves to try and overcome these constraints. We also needed to make sure the space was usable still by Re.group employees who were using that space at the time occasionally for board meetings and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's, sorry, I'll let you click over to the next slide, but I think that's an important part of that partnership. So from a Re.group perspective, we went to virtual reality would be a really good solution for the things that we were concerned about and how we could get to it. Robbie's pushback was, well, that can't be it. You know, we've got to do other stuff, and you know, I won't trump the rest of the presentation, but all the other stuff that we did is just as cool as the virtual reality. It's stuff that we wouldn't have thought of, but you know, it's a good example of why we work together and not separately. That's a real photo of someone actually having fun.
That's a real photo of my daughter having fun, in fact.
I didn't know.
We all have to use our own children in the waste education collateral. We talked about that yesterday. And yeah, I'll give you a 30-second clip so you can actually see what it's all about.
Canberrans can now experience firsthand how our recycling is sorted with a unique virtual reality experience. This allows visitors to try their hand at working on the sorting line and removing contaminants like rope or plastic bags to keep our recycling clean and machinery safe. Race the smart computer to identify and sort plastics and help bale the materials for sale. The opening of the Recycling Discovery Hub provides a great opportunity for the community to find out exactly what happens to the things we put in the bin.
Just to say a few more things about that before we move on to the other bits, but it was, and it's actually set up on the Re.group booth, probably not going to be able to get everyone through it, but it's here, it's live, it's something you can pick up and move around, which could be fun in the future. But we've been working with a group called Protein, who have done virtual reality on other areas. Did a lot of work with Toyota, do a lot of the car experience stuff. What they taught us, or taught me, Robbie probably already knew it, she knows most things, but certainly taught me, was about the gamification side. You know, I guess I'd imagined that just having a facility where people could walk through it in real time and actually, you know, feel like they're inside it. The gamification and coming up with, well, what can we do as an educational experience and teach these kids? So you've got the goggles on, you can actually pick things up. The videos are a little bit boring. It seems there's no kids here, but you can do really fun stuff. Like, you know, the first thing you do when you pick up a can off that belt, you can peg it at the head of the guy across the belt, which raised a few interesting concerns for us in the first
Only the
design.
adults do that.
I know. But then we thought it was hilariously funny and then went, it's probably not the right safety message. So now you get ejected from the facility if you hurt the virtual man too often. But there are other bits and pieces that, and I had my first opportunity to see kids actually playing with it. We did a lot of testing on it with adults and a lot of theory side on it. On Friday at the official opening, Robbie had a school group there, and it was so awesome. Like, adults are pretty unco and awkward. Like, obviously she's not here. The Member of Parliament who opened it, you know, it was not a natural thing for her to be doing. After she got out of the way and the school kids got in there, they are amazing. Like, they were running around, picking up things, throwing them around, you know, really having fun, and just watching them having fun and being excited about it. It was super cool. Sorry, I could talk about that for a long time.
It was great. They had a lot of challenges making it so it wasn't too toy-like, and they could still learn from it. And that's where I think it's a new field for virtual reality makers to work with educators to get a really good fit around that. So yes, please come and have a go later on. I'll tell you more about that in a few moments. We obviously had a few other design challenges around the site. We enlarged it to 60 square metres, but how do we still cater to the groups that we have coming out? And our biggest design challenge was right at the beginning about wanting to reframe waste as a verb, as something we do when we underutilise something to its fullest. And keeping that big idea in our design that it's only waste if we waste it. We wanted to broaden the story around recycling and not just this is what goes in your yellow bin and this is what goes in your red bin. We've been doing that for 10 years. We haven't seen any changes. We needed to get more powerful and talk about why and show the why. We wanted to tap into the curiosity, as I said before, in our adult audience, and in fact we've had more adults through in the last 3 months than we have school groups. The curiosity factor is very high. They can't wait to get on the bookings at the moment.
And they don't believe we're recycling, so it's a sceptical thing.
Yeah. So we began the design consultation process with some local experts, and in Canberra we have a lot of experts in design for interpretation, and they focused on ensuring that it was appealing to all audiences, not just school children. We went with a funky Elon Musk industrial design sort of graphics approach that went with this, which also happens to be mirrored in one of Canberra's craft brewery labels, I suppose. And like all powerful experiences, we needed it to be 3 main things. It had to be social, so children had to be talking and engaging and adults together in this learning journey. It had to be sensory, and any visit to a MRF is, you're going to already use your nose, obviously, the smell is there, the sight of all of these recyclables through the window, the sound of the machinery and the trucks beeping. But I do tell the children if they're tasting, they're doing it wrong. You have to use all your senses and your common sense. It had to be participatory, so the community had to help build this. They had to be able to leave a mark after they'd visited, and with our high school students, we just simply give them the Facebook emoji stickers and they get to comment on things, they get to say what shocked them, what they hate, what they love, and share that then with their friends. They also get to contribute to exhibition space within our room. So we had to overcome these gaps in understanding, and we bridged these gaps, particularly around processing, about how it happens at the MRF with our interactives. So we had the hands-on interactives, the trommel to sort by size and shape, the magnetic conveyor belt to sort by the magnetic properties, the VR to illuminate what's happening in the alchemy system where we're sorting the plastics. We had a table with a cross-section for the landfill to talk about that story, a demonstration space to be showing how eddy currents actually affect aluminium, which is a very difficult concept to show otherwise, and to do other experiments around leachate and things like that. We wanted to broaden the story because different visitors come for different purposes.
I'll just say on that, I'd expected everyone to be lining up at the VR, and I didn't know how exciting the other things would be. I have never seen a trommel spun as quickly as it was by a bunch of 7-year-olds who were they were having a blast. Like, I think all of those elements really work together and they break up into groups and do cool stuff.
So our second biggest gap that we were trying to bridge was around understanding materials, where they come from, what they're made into and how we interact with them. So our design team showcased them in a museum sort of quality of this desirable product backlit behind glass, and they showed through the other parts of the design where the materials have come from and what they will be turned into. Now this was really critical in this day and age for our adult audiences in particular to bridge the gap and bust those myths that a bottle will go back into a bottle, that a plastic bottle will go back into a plastic bottle, because that's not always the case, and this had to be done really sensitively. We had to produce it as an alternative. It can go back into a bottle, but it can also go on to these other things. I think as an industry we've let ourselves down for the last 20 years. We haven't communicated to our community that the impacts from globalisation, that we import our things from overseas, and the diminishing manufacturing sector in Australia. It's crucial that we keep them up to date. It's crucial that we keep them keep their faith in the system. We wanted to showcase all sorts of technology and design solutions, right down to the fabric of the building, the carpets made from recovered and reclaimed fishing nets from Interface, who were so keen on the project they provided them to us. Reclaimed building materials, hardwood flooring, tiles, all of those things. This was probably the hardest element of the project manager's job, actually, was to make sure that all the contractors really understood what we were trying to get out of this. And we had to overcome not only understandings, bridge the gap around understandings of how the materials are processed, about what materials are made of, but our third gap that we had to bridge was overcoming the challenge of visitors walking away feeling overwhelmed and feeling powerless. And we did this through our industry-supported innovation wall, which was a way of showcasing, in a hands-on way, you can go over and grab all these cool items. The way people are designing out waste, the way corporations and companies are trying to solve problems, right down to your 3D printed Adidas Parley sneakers. We've got some local showcases, a lot of Australian exhibits in there, and the opportunity for school groups to put things in and include them in the display as well. We wanted to inspire our reuse economy and our local artisans in upcycling and repurposing by showcasing some really beautiful pieces of recycled artwork to bring it out of the fringe, I suppose. And importantly, we wanted to talk about waste where it happens. So we had a kitchenette in the old facility, and our design team said, no, you need to keep the kitchenette, even though we were thinking about just trying to use the space for education purposes. He said, no, you need to talk about waste where waste is happening. You need to be able to show them how they can avoid waste with their shopping. We use it to talk about food storage, to organics processing as well, and collection with the caddy on the top. The children can go over to that, and then the top drawer they pull open, and they get to sort what goes into your recycling bin, your rubbish bin, and then we're really trying to introduce the concept of thinking beyond the bin for those trickier items like batteries and light bulbs. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And we used every opportunity, including the toilet. This is one of my colleagues' favourite parts because we had a very tragic toilet, and now at least it's wheelchair accessible and we can have everyone from the community access it. But the favourite part of this is the close the loop when you poop display up on the top. And this was really critical for our recent visitors who wanted to know, where can we buy these products so that we are buying it back? Because if you're not buying it back, you're only doing half the job, and that's the Great Planet Arc slogan. So we actually showcased where you can buy them and what these products look like, not just from an industrial scale, but from a householder's perspective. So that's the Recycling Discovery Hub. We opened last Friday. As I said, we've had a lot of adult groups and a lot of community groups come through. And if you're ever in the ACT, we'd love you to come and visit. But please take care of the warnings. It does exactly what it says on the packet.